We were talking about an assessment of the congregation this morning, talking about the essence of unity, coming together as a unified body and moving beyond the realm of just mere union and going into the realm of becoming a unity, a common unity. And I thought it apropos as we were singing that last song. I was standing in the back and I watched Brittany and Joy as they were fanning themselves. And I noticed that they were in syncopation with the song that was being sung. And I thought, wow, that neither one of them can be totally in tune with one another. And as the song got ready to come to a conclusion, Brittany decided that we needed a little bit more of an allegro. So she starts fanning a little bit faster, and Joy just kept up with the tempo. I enjoyed singing the song that I asked Jason to lead. I like that song. Sometimes we think of it as very childish, and it is, because it is a time where you have a very simple melody and a communication, and it thrills my heart to see Isaiah sing the words of it, and to look around and see if other people are singing, to see Jacob smile as he watches his son sing. It is a way of, through a mnemonic device, to begin teaching Isaiah and others the simple thought of Jesus Christ and him crucified. I like the fact of hearing the growth of children, and it is truly amazing. Well, this morning we left it with a blank screen, and I appreciate Jason so much, not only leading singing this afternoon, but also lending a hand in fixing the projector. I thought there was some kind of diode in there that needed to be fixed. No, took it all apart, put it back together, nothing. Jason came up and goes, well, why don't we unplug it? Unplugs it, throws it back in. We're back with the overhead. Amazing. I got like 55 years of college, and Jason has life practical service. Tells you which one's more important. Anyways, we press on. So how are we seen by others? I know that one of the things that I hear about Winnetka is that it is a very friendly congregation, that it is giving, it is caring, and that people talk with the visitors that come. And that speaks volumes about us. But can we rest on those laurels? And the answer is no. We don't rest on any laurels. This morning we got 5 visitor cards. Tonight I'll put them into a care group message that I'll send out. And we'll see how many cards and notes our visitors got from us. And I must tell you, it is uplifting. This past week, I went to the mail, or actually Linda went, brought the mail in, and I got 2 cards, 2 notes from people. I mean, I know one, the other one I don't have a clue about. And it was from people that attend at Lassen Street. Somewhere or another, they had heard that I had tested positive for COVID, that I was in isolation for so many days. And so they let me know that they were praying for me in both cards, and wanted me to gain strength and recover and press on to the work. It was encouraging to receive those cards, those notes, and to know that people care. So when we do things like that, it does indeed speak volumes about who we are. And so that's one of the things that we need to come to grips with. But the other thing that we need to come to grips with is whether or not we are abounding in the work of service. Look at 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, and verse 58. Paul, as he begins to bring his thoughts to a conclusion, and with regards to the resurrection. We talked a little bit about the resurrection and the resurrected form at lunch this afternoon. But notice in verse 58, therefore, in other words, you know what? We're going to go through the resurrection. We have this life to do what we need to be doing in regards to the God of heaven. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. The idea of abounding means to be ever increasing, to not being content with what you have done, to be constantly learning, constantly growing. I appreciate it this morning that I made a statement about a man by the name of Simon Legree. Austin was in the back. He didn't know who I was talking about. Do you now know? But no. I appreciate it because you asked, how do I spell it? And you began to look at and began to search for it. The reason I bring it up is because we do those things. If we're growing and developing, we're going to be constantly seeking to learn, seeking to do different things. I appreciate that about Austin. I'll put out a word. Okay, what does that word mean? I tell him. And I appreciate the fact that not always does he agree with me and that he's checking it out. That's what we're to be doing. We're to be abounding in our quest of knowledge. Just because I say something doesn't mean you accept it carte blanche without checking. You check. And the same thing with our work. There is so much more we can do. There are ways that we can abound. There are ways we can move forward. I was telling individuals at lunch today that I will begin a class this week with somebody who came to me and said, after a long period of time, will you study with me? Can we set up a time? The answer is absolutely. And so we'll begin this week. And I'm so encouraged by it, and I hope you are too. But that doesn't mean we stop there. Doesn't mean that that's the end all and be all of what we're doing. I long to be back in the days of 4, 5, 12, and more classes a week. Abounding. So again, that's individual. We look at it and we say, okay, congregationally, what are we doing? And then I go, well, I've got to be a little bit more myopic. I've got to look at me. What am I doing in that regards? So we then begin to stand back and we realize that the problems that we face as a congregation, and let's be honest, we do. We face some very serious situations. We look at where we are financially. That's individual responsibility. And we have to accept that on an individual level. What am I doing? What can I do better? I'm not going to come in and say you've got to do this or any number of other things. Rather, the appeal is look to yourselves. See what you want to lay by in store. And again, if you can, address it. But it is an individual responsibility. And so much what we face in life is exactly that, an individual responsibility. And some people say, well, what's the major difference that divides us in this nation? And I think the big difference that divides us, and I don't want to get into politics, I think the individual thing that divides us is personal responsibility. Where does it reside with me? I have to make the decision what's best, where I'm going to go with things. And do I want somebody else shouldering the burden for me? Or am I going to shoulder it myself? That's the major difference. And so we look at us from a spiritual standpoint. And I look at it from a congregational level. And again, it comes back to me as an individual. We were talking about finances. And if you go over to 1 Corinthians, the 16th chapter, we were just looking at 1558. But now look at what he then goes on to say. Verse 1 of chapter 16 of 1 Corinthians. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so do you also. On the first day of every week, let each one of you put aside and save, so that he may prosper, as he may prosper, that no collections be made when I come. Individual responsibility. We take it upon ourselves. Notice that there is no set amount. Paul in the Corinthian letters, he talks about liberality, freely, openly, bountifully. But he said it's up to you. Even as you look at the book of Acts with Ananias and Sapphira, while it remained unsold, did it not remain in your discretion to do what you wanted? It was yours. You can determine. We're not told 10%. We're not told 20 or any number, but rather with a rather ambiguous with liberality. It means freely and cheerfully. We do not do it grudgingly, but we do it because it is what we're called upon to do, to further the work of the cause of Christ here. And as I told you this morning, I was handed a financial statement by the bookkeeper. And I look at the various numbers. And like I told you as well, I'm being very blunt and honest. I am the biggest drain on the finances here. I know that. I understand that. And people tell me, well, you're underpaid. I don't think so. But yet people do, because they say, well, preachers in Southern California make six figures. They may make six figures. That's between the congregation and the individual. But I have to sit back and analyze. I have to sit back and calculate. I like being here. I truly do. I've been here 15 years, as I told Judy this afternoon. I think it's closer to 16, but what do I know? 16? Okay. Sometimes it feels like 50, but no, I speak in jest. But I've been here a while. I think longer than any other preacher that has been at Winnetka. But I enjoy working together with us. It is no longer me or Linda and I. It is we. Hopefully we have become part and parcel of that grand family that is here. But I also have a responsibility as a member of the congregation. And so I sit back and I have to ask myself, am I going to have to make tenths? Am I going to have to be like Paul with regards to the Philippians? Well, I robbed other churches in support of you. So that's what, when we begin to take a hard look, and you see up there, we have a budget of 19, and we're sitting roughly today at 12, last week 15, the week before it's 16, it gives one pause. It really does. And I look at the financial statement, and I realize that in the last 12 months, sure, we've made it. We've made it over the last 12 months. But I sit back and I'm a little bit more contemporary. What have we done in the last 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? Because we've gone through changes. And again, that's individual responsibility to the entirety of the congregation. So we were talking about with liberality, 2 Corinthians 8. That's exactly what Paul's talking about there. And in 2 Corinthians 9, and I believe Jason talked about it this morning, as they purposed in their hearts what they're going to give. We are stewards. We are stewards of what God gives us. But we are also stewards of this property, of this building. We're stewards of it. And it speaks volumes as to what our property looks like. So, am I willing to give them my time and effort to do various projects around here? I appreciate the efforts on the part of Austin and Jacob. I appreciate the efforts on the part of Janice and others who come down here and work and tackle various projects. It's laudable. And I don't want you to go and think that it's not appreciated and not noticed, because it is. But again, it speaks to our stewardship. And so while we might be noted as being a friendly congregation, It's also noticed if our property is in disrepair. If we look inside the building and it's encrusted with spider webs, dirty floors, bathrooms that are reflective not of pride. And that's just part of it, because again, it comes back to the realm of stewardship. So when you think of stewardship, so much is involved, so much. And we want to be mindful of each and every one. We have to keep up on our stewardship. I like to think when you come to our home that the house is clean and kept. We do not have the finest of furniture or anything. It's just pedestrian. But Linda goes to great lengths to keep it clean. That's part of her stewardship. Part of mine as well. Because if you came there and it was all disheveled, you'd go, what's up with that? And you would think unkindly of us. So everything that we're about comes back to that realm of stewardship. And the same thing is true congregationally, individually. What are we doing within the congregation? Go back into the Old Testament. And we're going to go back into Ecclesiastes. And let's go into the 10th chapter of Ecclesiastes. And we're going to drop down into verse 18. Through indolence, Solomon writes, the rafters sag. Through slackness, the house leaks. Well, we don't want that. Because when you go back into the 9th chapter and verse 10 of Ecclesiastes, whatever your hand finds to do, verily, do it with all your might. For there is no activity or planning or wisdom in Sheol where you're going. Whatever we decide to do, embrace it. Do it with relish and gusto. Do it to the best of your ability. This building was painted 16 years ago. And I can remember various people coming down to help paint. Rita's daughter, Stephanie, came down, and Rita had never painted before. And she wanted to help. Stephanie came down and had never painted before. She wanted to help. And so Linda and Janice very patiently told her, here's how you do it. And so she undertook a task to do it. And she tried her best. And I appreciated her efforts. Trish came down and helped. Dolores came down and helped. Several of the women were down here. Middle of the day, hot, oppressively hot. Linda and Janice had taped off and were underneath with a gun, spraying all underneath there. They came out and their hair was encrusted with the red paint. Their face was encrusted with it. They had goggles on. You could see where the goggles met. They were having the time of their life. I was on the roof, cleaning the roof off. None of us are professionals, but we did what we could. There's so much that each one of us can do. Now think of it not so much in the realm of those things physical, because there's a lot we can do, but what about spiritual? Because there's so much we can do. We're personable people. Already determined that. We talk to people when they come here. Do we talk to people when we're out there? Do we invite them? Those people that were here this morning, 6 of them, were here because of Austin. That's why, correct? You invited them? Kind of, sort of. You invited one and the rest came. See what power you have? What magnetism? What draw? But that's all that we need to do. Just invite one. You realize if each one of us invited one a week, not everybody would have a turnout. But we have 31 members. And if each one invited one, based upon the averages that we're seeing in all projections, that out of all of those people being invited, that 2 would show up. Now you calculate that out over 52 weeks, you're at 104 people. Out of 104 people, the rate of Bible classes that would come, again, Yeakley points out that there's roughly a 2 to 3% of people that will consent to Bible classes. So you have 102, 104 people that come as visitors. Out of that, you may get 2 or 3 Bible studies, 2 or 3 new converts, 2 or 3 more added to the household of God. That's what we're called upon to be doing. And that's something that maybe, as an individual, we could look at and say, you know what? I can do a lot better. I can do better. We know out of Galatians, the 6th chapter, verse 5. Paul writes and challenges the Galatians. And he said, each one's going to bear his own load. All the work that Austin does, I'm not going to get credit for it. I'm not going to be able to ride his coattails because I've got to carry my own load. And I've got enough to do there. And conversely, Austin can't ride on my coattails. Each one of us have the work that needs to be done, that we can do. Some of us are 5 talent, some of us are 2, some of us are only 1. But even if we're only 1, we're still called upon to do it. And we're called upon to do things according to the pattern, according to the scriptures. I know in this lesson we've talked a little bit about finances. There are many congregations that are facing financial struggles. And what they're doing is they're compromising the truth in order to adjust themselves. We do not want to do that. We don't want to get to that point where we say, well, you know what? We'll enter into a business arrangement in order to get more money coming in. We can't do that. The only way that we can get money is by that which is authorized in the scriptures. And you cannot see anywhere where you can enter into a business arrangement in order to get money for the church. You can't. It is by the free will laying by in store. Now, yes, back with the parable of the talents, Jesus pointed out to the 1 talent man, you should at least put what you had in the bank so that I would have had interest. So yeah, if we do have an excess, it's in the bank, the interest is provided, reasonable. But not to make business deals with others at all. And a lot of congregations are doing it. Congregations that were said to be conservative. And they feel justified in doing it. Again, each congregation is autonomous. And what we have to do is we have to remain steadfast to his word, to his truth in all that is done. So now we come back and we look at other things. We know that we, during the pandemic, have been hit hard with individuals neglecting the assembly together. It's no longer important. We see the deficit on Wednesday evening, Sunday morning Bible class, Sunday afternoon. How many years ago on Sunday afternoon would we be at 25 and 30? 50, 60 for Sunday morning. A lot of things changed. Attitudes changed. Convenience changed. When we went to YouTube, people feel, well, I can do it electronically. YouTube serves a purpose, but it is not a substitute for congregating together with the saints. Hebrews, the 10th chapter, verses 23 through 25. So I think as individuals, we need to stand back and look at ourselves and our attitude toward the assembling together with the saints on the first day of the week. So how are we doing? How are we doing there? Again, that comes back and has to be answered by us on an individual basis. We have to come to that final position. And yes, if somebody were to ask me where I thought they were, I would tell them. Do you want to hear it? I'll tell you. But only when you ask me. Ask me. But I would prefer you would ask yourself. You would look to yourself and say, here's what I can do. Here's where I can increase. Here's where I can do better. So what you have to do is you have to make a choice. That's your move. I enjoyed when we had in our living room our chess set up and be able to just sit there. We had 2 chairs and we'd be able to play chess together. For whatever reason, we no longer do that. But I enjoyed watching Jacob try to teach Tyler how to play chess. It was great fun. Great fun. Tyler would try to make his move. Jacob would counter it. A few moves later, Tyler would say, how did you do that? How did you get me? Let's play again. But see, that's exactly where we are. It's our move. We have to make the choices. And what are some of the choices we make? What's our study of the scriptures like? You look at Acts 17 chapter. Those that were in Berea were more noble-minded because they searched the scriptures daily to see whether or not they were so. In Ephesus, the same thing was going on. The school of Tyrannus. They would go there and they would meet and they would study. And I'm not saying give up your job or anything like that to devote yourself wholly to the scriptures, because there are other scriptures tell you, if a man will not work, neither let him eat. But we can grow in our depth and knowledge. I've been so encouraged by Linda, my wife. When I get up in the morning, I try to give her an hour where she doesn't have me around. And when I come out after that hour, she's still engrossed in her Bible study. And I'll sit down, she'll say, I've got questions. And she'll have any number of questions. And we'll go over and we'll talk about it. It is the highlight of my day. Number 1, to see her study. And number 2, to sit down and engage in spiritual discussion with her. It's a highlight. I appreciate it so much. But I think that part of, as a congregation, what we may struggle with, is that we're kind of in that league with what's seen in Amos the 8th chapter and verse 11. Not a famine of bread or thirst for water, but rather for hearing of the word of God. Some translations have hearing of the word of the Lord. Regardless. Do you have that famine in your life? Where there's that niche that needs to be filled? And I've got to take care of it. I mean, if we go 5 hours without eating, we're going, when's the next meal coming? You know, Austin was talking about fasting a couple of weeks ago. And I was reading a couple of days ago about 2 men who had agreed to go on a fast together for 3 days. And they had a specific reason why they were fasting. And then they came together after the fast. They broke the fast. And they talked about what they had learned during that time. What they had been concentrating on, what they had been focusing on. And they found it to be very fulfilling. We need to have a desire for God's word. More than our daily food. Long for it. Desire it. But that's something we have to do ourselves. We're not here every day of the week. It's not like we're going to school and we're called upon to study and study and study for 6-8 hours a day in order to maintain and retain the knowledge. In fact, studies have shown that the way that you hold the most knowledge is not hours-long study, but rather in increments of 15 and 20 minutes, and take a break. That's where you're going to gain the optimum. Some people retain it better in the morning, others at night. But in snippet times, you're going to hold on to it more. And if you're capable, have music in the background, especially if you're a man, because that helps you retain it. Most women have to have it quiet. But for whatever reason, it's been shown that men have a greater retention level of what they've studied if they have music in the background. I don't know why, but it seems to be the case. Whatever it takes, study to show yourself approved. Examine the scriptures, because what knowledge is empowerment. That's the key. The more you know, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more empowered you are in your life, and that carries over into every facet of life. You could go back into the beautiful Psalm, the 119th Psalm, and notice what the psalmist writes in verse 10 beginning. It's rather quite beautiful. With all my heart I have sought thee. Do not let me wander from thy commandments. Thy word have I treasured in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. Blessed art thou, O Lord. Teach me thy statutes. With my lips I have told of all the ordinances of thy mouth. I have rejoiced in the way of thy testimonies, as much as in all riches. I will meditate on thy precepts, and regard thy ways. I shall delight in thy statutes. I shall not forget thy word. Beautiful. That's where we long to be. And as individuals, we spend time trying to get there. And so as a congregation, are we there? As individuals, are we there? And are we willing to share that knowledge one with another? And I realize that the way we are doing classes now, with using microphones and all of that and worrying about people hearing over YouTube, I know that it breaks the continuity and the spontaneity of a class. I understand that. And having taught in secular education, whether it be in elementary, high school, or at the college level, spontaneity in discussion is what's called for. There is a hesitancy on y'all's part when classes are being taught. Would you agree with me? That you don't want to talk into that microphone? That you don't want to pass it around? That you have something to say, but you go, you know what? It's such a hassle, and I don't want it. And so you know what you do? You clam up, and you don't share. Well, by sharing, you help somebody else grow. By asking a question, you help somebody else grow. By making a comment, you help me to grow. Because I don't know if you're absorbing what I'm saying. I don't know if what I'm saying is being accepted. But by the dialogue going back and forth, we grow mutually. I kind of like the cartoon or the little photo that's on the overhead. The idea of be there for one another. Out of Philippians, the 2nd chapter and the first 4 verses. We bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. And what we're told to do is have the mind of Christ. And the mind of Christ, if you go backwards from where he talks about how the mind of Christ in Philippians 2, you see that the mind of Christ is do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, Regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Have I grown to that level? As a congregation, have we gotten to that common union where we become a community? And as a community, we have that care one for another. So I need to look at myself. I am part of that community. I need to exemplify that, no matter what anyone else does. And maybe if I get more activated, more aligned, it's going to draw others along with me. So am I there? Have I embraced the mindset of Christ? Do I have that as my driving force in my relationship with others? Is there a shared vision? Because that's what we want, a shared vision. Do we share the ultimate goal? The goal that we press on toward. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Can we say, I know that in the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness? Is that your vision? Is that what you look forward to? That shared vision, that longing vision. Well, are we there? That we may stand perfect and fully assured in the will of God. That we walk in a manner worthy of the calling. We talked about that this morning. And definitely in the letter to the church in Ephesus. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. They were told to go back and do the deeds they did at first. They had been a congregation for over 30-some years. And they had lost their first love. Oh, they're still going through the motions. But they had not stood back, and taken a good hard look at themselves. And that's what we have to do. Take a good hard look at ourselves. Are we taking a good hard look? Is there something going on out in the parking lot? Okay, good deal. Oh, okay. Well, at least we're getting air going through there. Look at John 17, chapter, verse 21. That you may be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. We talked about that this morning. That is the unity that we need to see in the congregation. A shared desire to become one in mind, purpose, action, one in love, compassion, concern. Are we really of that mind with one another? Can it be said that we have come together as one? Well, how do you see our state of union in the congregation? Do you see us having come together as a community, a common unity? Have you looked at yourself individually and seen where you stand, how you stack up? Because that's ultimately where the questions and problems lie. Whether or not I have fulfilled my part. And if I have fulfilled my part, then maybe I can help you fulfill your part. That we can conjointly work together. And that's redundant, I realize that. But that's what we want, is a working together. Well, the lesson is yours this afternoon. And again, it was not one designed to show how to become a child of God. That was not the purpose. But rather to those of us that are children of God, as to look at ourselves, to see as a autonomous congregation how we stand before the God of heaven. Have we done the various things that we need to do, called upon to do as an individual? And then how does that translate into our work as a congregation? If there are any that might be subject to the invitation, need the prayers of the congregation for strength or encouragement, or you're here and you need to put on Christ in the waters of baptism. If there's any spiritual assistance we can provide, we invite you to come while we stand and sing. I have decided.